The morning of my wedding, I stood alone in the church vestibule and listened to the organ start. No one came to take my arm. No one knocked on the door to check if I was ready. Just the muffled sound of 200 guests settling into their pews and the slow creak of the wooden floor beneath my heels as I shifted my weight and tried to breathe. I had known, for 3 days, that my family would not be there. My mother had called on a Wednesday night, her voice flat and careful the way it always got when my father had already made the decision and she was just delivering it. "Your father feels this marriage is a mistake," she said. "We won't be attending." My brother never called at all. I stood there in that vestibule with my bouquet shaking slightly in my hands, and I thought, this is the moment. This is the moment you either fall apart or you walk. I walked. The doors opened. The sunlight hit the aisle like something out of a dream, warm and gold, and every face in those pews turned toward me. And the man I loved was standing at the altar with tears already running down his face. My best friend Maya was in the front row with her hand pressed over her mouth. A colleague from the hospital, Dr. Reeves, was dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. And I thought, these people showed up for me. These people drove hours, took time off work, bought dresses and ties and wrapped gifts and sat in these wooden pews on a Saturday morning for me. I made it to the altar without crying. Barely. My name is Rachel. I am a trauma surgeon. And this is the story of how my family tried to take everything from me and how I finally stopped letting them. I grew up in a house where love was conditional and conditions were never fully explained. My father was a civil engineer, precise and exacting, a man who approached his children the way he approached load-bearing calculations, always looking for the flaw that would cause collapse. My mother deferred to him on everything, not because she was weak, I understood later, but because she had learned, over 20 years, that disagreement cost too much. My brother Danny was the oldest and the favorite, though no one in our house would have used that word. It was just the way the light fell. When Danny got a B, my father said, "Next time, an A." When I got an A, my father said, "Good. Don't get comfortable." I was 12 when I decided I was going to be a doctor. Not because anyone encouraged me, my father thought medicine was unstable compared to engineering, but because I had watched my grandmother spend 3 days in a hospital where no one explained anything to her, where she was frightened and alone and the nurses were kind but rushed, and I had thought, someone should be better at this. Someone should sit down and look a scared person in the eye and tell them the truth. I was going to be that person. I spent high school with my head down. I got into a strong pre-med program on a partial scholarship and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. My father's contribution to my college education was a firm handshake at the door and the words, "Don't come back expecting us to bail you out." I did not come back expecting that. I met my husband, I'll call him Thomas, in my 2nd year of medical school. He was finishing a master's in public health, quiet and steady. The kind of person who remembered what you said 3 weeks ago and brought it up gently when it was relevant. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. My father's reaction, when I told him, was to ask Thomas's income. Thomas told him honestly he worked for a non-profit health organization. The salary was modest but meaningful. My father set down his fork at the dinner table and said, "That's not a plan. That's a hobby," Thomas said, with perfect calm. "With respect, sir, I think Rachel will be the one supporting this family in a few years, and I'll be proud of that." My father did not speak directly to Thomas for the rest of the meal. The engagement lasted 14 months. I was finishing my residency. We wanted to wait until I had a little breathing room. During those 14 months, my father made his position known in small, consistent ways. He did not ask about wedding plans. He did not ask about Thomas. When I called home, and I did call, every Sunday, because I kept hoping for something I couldn't quite name, he talked about Danny's new job, Danny's apartment, Danny's girlfriend. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother called and said my father had decided they would not come. "He says you're making a mistake," she said. "He says if you go through with this, you're on your own." I was in the hospital parking garage when she said this. It was 11 at night. I had just finished a 14-hour shift. I sat on the concrete floor next to my car, and I held the phone against my ear, and I breathed for a long time. "Mom," I said finally, "are you coming?" Silence. "I can't come without your father," she said. "I'm sorry, Rachel." Danny texted me the next morning. "Heard about the wedding thing. That's rough. Let me know how it goes." Like I had a scheduling conflict. Like I had a flat tire. I did not respond. Thomas held me that night while I cried in a way I had not cried since I was a child. Big, ugly, full-body crying that I was not proud of and could not stop. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He didn't tell me they'd come around. He just held on and said, "I've got you. We've got each other. That's the whole thing, Rachel. That's all of it." I believed him. Eventually, I stopped crying. I got up. I called Maya. "They're not coming," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm going to be there so loud you won't even notice." She was right. She was right about almost everything. The wedding was beautiful. Thomas cried when I walked in. I cried during the vows. Dr. Reeves gave a toast that referenced something kind I had done for a patient 6 years earlier that I had completely forgotten, and half the room was in tears by the end of it. We danced until the venue turned the lights on and off 3 times. My family's absence was a shape in the room, a table we had set that stayed empty, but it did not break anything. I had been afraid it would. It didn't. We left for our honeymoon 10 days later. Portugal, Lisbon and the Douro Valley, and long dinners that started at 9 at night because that was how they did it there, and we were on no one's schedule but our own. We were on the train between Porto and Pinhão when my phone buzzed with a text from my father. I almost didn't open it. I was watching the Douro River run alongside the tracks, olive green and wide in the afternoon light, and Thomas had his head on my shoulder and was half asleep, and everything was exactly as it should be. But I opened it. "Your brother's engagement party is in 6 weeks. We are expecting a contribution of $11,000 toward the venue and catering. Family takes care of family." I read it twice. I showed it to Thomas. He opened his eyes fully and read it. Then he looked at me. "You know what I think?" he said. "I know," I said. "But it's your call." I put my phone in my bag and watched the river for a long time. They had not come to my wedding. They had not called to congratulate me. They had not sent a card, a text, a single word, acknowledging that I had married the person I loved on the most important day of my life. And now, 6 weeks later, from a train in Portugal where I was sitting next to my husband on our honeymoon, my father was texting me to write a check for $11,000 toward my brother's engagement party. Family takes care of family. I thought about the parking garage. I thought about sitting on the concrete at 11 at night after a 14-hour shift. I thought about my mother's silence on the phone when I asked if she was coming. I typed back, "Congratulations to Danny, best wishes." Then I transferred $1 to my father via Venmo with the note, "Best wishes, that's my contribution." I put my phone in airplane mode and didn't turn it back on for 4 days. When I turned it back on, there were 23 messages. My father had escalated in a way that was, in retrospect, completely predictable, and that I had nonetheless not fully prepared for. The first messages were cold and controlled. I was selfish. I was ungrateful. I had embarrassed the family. By day 2, the tone had shifted. I had always been difficult. I had always put my own ambitions above the people who loved me. By day 3, there was a message from Danny that said, simply, "What is wrong with you?" My mother sent one message. On day 4, "Please just apologize and we can move forward." I read all of them sitting at the kitchen table in our apartment, Thomas across from me with his hands around a coffee mug, watching my face. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to finish my coffee," I said. "And then I want to go to work. And then I want to come home and have dinner with you." "That's a good plan," he said. I went to work. I came home. We had dinner. I did not apologize. Over the following months, my father tried several more approaches. He called the hospital twice and asked to speak with the chief of my department. The first time, the receptionist said I was unavailable. The second time, my chief, Dr. Patricia Huang, a woman who had survived far more complicated situations than a difficult father-in-law, came to find me in the break room. "A man called again," she said, setting down her tablet. "Said you'd stolen money from the family." She looked at me steadily. I told him our staff don't discuss personal matters through the hospital line. He said he would go to the medical board. My stomach dropped. "Patricia," I said. "I've already spoken with legal," she said. "There's nothing actionable. But I want you to document everything." She paused. "Is there anything I should know?" I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He's a bully," she said. "And bullies tend to escalate until there's a real consequence." "I know," I said. "You have full support from this department," she said. Go back to work. I went back to work. My father followed through on the medical board threat. He filed a complaint alleging financial misconduct, some vague language about misappropriated funds that made no sense and had no evidence, because there was no evidence, because nothing had happened. The board reviewed it and closed it within 3 weeks with no action. I received a letter informing me the complaint had been dismissed. I should have felt relieved. Mostly I felt tired. Thomas drove me to a park that evening and we sat on a bench by a pond and he bought me an ice cream from a cart nearby and we watched people throw bread to the ducks and he said, "He threw everything he had at you. It didn't land. It's over." "Is it?" I said. Thomas thought about this honestly, which was one of the things I loved about him. He did not give me easy reassurance. "Probably not forever," he said. "But for now is enough," I said. We sat there until it got dark. 6 months later, my mother called. It was a Sunday evening, which was when she always called. I had always kept Sundays open, even through residency, some reflex of hope I couldn't fully extinguish. I almost didn't pick up. I was 30 seconds away from letting it go to voicemail. I picked up. "Your father isn't well," she said. Her voice was different. Not the careful, managed voice of a person delivering a message. Something underneath it had cracked open. "What's wrong?" I said. "His heart," she said. "He had an episode last week. He's stable, but Rachel, they found blockages. He's going to need surgery." I sat down. "How serious?" I said. "Serious," she said. "Triple bypass. The surgeon says the sooner the better." She paused. "He won't admit it, but he's scared. I can see it." I thought about the medical board complaint. I thought about the 23 messages. I thought about family takes care of family and $11,000 and don't come back expecting us to bail you out. I thought about my grandmother in that hospital, frightened, with no one to explain anything to her. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. I hung up and sat very still for a long time. Thomas came and sat next to me on the couch and didn't say anything, just put his hand over mine. "He needs heart surgery," I said. "I heard," Thomas said. "I want to review his chart," I said. "I want to know who his surgeon is." Thomas looked at me carefully. "Okay. I'm not doing it for him," I said. And then I stopped, because that wasn't quite right. "I don't know why I'm doing it," I said. I know what happens to patients who are scared and alone in a hospital. I know what that looks like. And I can't," I stopped again. "You don't have to explain it," Thomas said. "He called the medical board on me," I said. "I know, he missed our wedding. I know you know," I said. I leaned my head back against the couch. "I'm going to call his cardiologist tomorrow." Thomas squeezed my hand. "I'll drive you if you want to go see him." I called the cardiologist in the morning. Identified myself, explained the family connection, asked to understand the case. The cardiologist, a good one. I could tell from the way he talked through the details, walked me through everything patiently. The surgery was scheduled. The surgical team was strong. The plan was sound. I asked 3 specific questions that only a surgeon would think to ask. He paused after the 3rd one and said, "You're in medicine. Trauma surgery," I said. There was a brief silence. "Your father told me his daughter was in the pharmaceutical industry," he said. I closed my eyes for a moment. "I'm not," I said, "but his care is in good hands. Thank you." I did not go to the hospital. I had thought about it for 3 days and decided I wasn't ready, and that making myself go before I was ready wouldn't help either of us. I sent my mother a text with 3 specific questions to ask the surgical team before the procedure, things to watch for, things to document. She replied with, "Thank you. This means a lot." She did not ask me to come. I think she understood. The surgery went well. My father was home within a week. My mother called to tell me, and I said I was glad, and I meant it. There was a long pause on the line. Then my mother said, "He's different since the surgery. Quieter. He keeps looking at the photos on the mantle." She paused. "There aren't any of you after high school. I noticed that." He noticed too. I didn't say anything. "I'm not asking you to forgive anything," my mother said. "I just wanted you to know." "Okay," I said. "Are you well, Rachel?" she said. And the way she asked it, not as a formality, but as a real question, careful and a little frightened, made something shift in my chest. "I'm well," I said. "Thomas and I are well. I'm happy, Mom." "Good," she said. Her voice was thick. "Good." 14 months after his surgery, my father called me himself. I was in my office between cases, eating a sandwich over a cardiology journal, and probably getting crumbs on it, when my phone showed his name. I stared at it through 2 full rings. I picked up. "Rachel," he said. His voice was older, or maybe I was just hearing it differently now without the armor I had always worn when he spoke to me, without bracing for impact. "Hi," I said. Silence for a moment. The particular silence of someone who has prepared something and is now discovering that prepared things don't survive the actual moment. "I saw in the newsletter," he said finally. "From the hospital. Department of Surgery. There was a piece about outcomes in trauma care. Your name was in it. The hospital put out a quarterly newsletter. I had forgotten I was mentioned in the last issue." "Yeah," I said. "It was a study we contributed to." "You were listed as a co-author," he said. "Yes." Another silence. "I told your mother," he said. I said I told her my daughter co-authored a study. He stopped. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "I didn't say it right, back then. Any of it. I didn't. I pushed you in directions that weren't mine to push." He stopped again. "I'm not good at this." "I know," I said. "I want to try to be better at it," he said. "If you'll let me." I looked at the window of my office, at the parking lot below and the gray November sky above it. I thought about everything. I let myself think about all of it for 1 full minute: the parking garage, the Venmo dollar, the medical board complaint, the wedding, all of it. And then I thought about my grandmother in her hospital bed and the reason I became who I became. "I'd like that," I said. "It's going to be slow." "That's fair," he said. "Thomas and I are coming to visit Mom for Thanksgiving," I said. "You can join us if you want." He made a sound that I didn't quite have a word for. Not crying exactly, something adjacent to it. "I'll be there," he said. We drove out the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Thomas brought 2 pies, 1 pecan, 1 apple because he could never decide and always made both. My mother had the good china out, which she only did for Christmas and Easter, and apparently, now, for this, my father was thinner than I remembered. The surgery had taken something out of him, or maybe just revealed what had always been underneath the architecture of control he had built around himself. He shook Thomas's hand at the door and said, "It's good to see you," and Thomas said, "You too, sir," and the 2 of them stood there for a moment like people who had agreed, wordlessly, to build something over the rubble of what had come before. Dinner was not a movie reconciliation. My father did not weep and confess. I did not throw my arms around him. We talked about the weather, and Thomas's new project, and the neighbor's dog, and a news story my mother had been following. There were moments of awkward silence, that no one filled with false warmth, and those silences were, in their way, more honest than anything we could have said. After dinner, my father and I ended up standing on the back porch while Thomas and my mother did the dishes. It was cold, and he had his hands in his pockets, and we both looked out at the yard. "You walked yourself down the aisle," he said. "I did," I said. He nodded slowly. "I've thought about that." "So have I said. "I would have been proud," he said. "I know I didn't. I know I made it, so that was impossible. But I want you to know, I would have been proud." I looked out at the dark yard for a long time. "I know," I said finally. And I found, to my own surprise, that I believed it. That somewhere under all the damage, under the control and the coldness and the years of conditional love, there had been something that was trying, in all the wrong ways, to be a father. It wasn't enough, on its own. It wasn't a fix, but it was something true, and I was not so proud that I couldn't take it. "Come inside," I said. Thomas made 2 pies. He almost smiled. "He brought 2? "He always makes 2, I said. "That's just who he is." My father followed me back inside, into the warm kitchen where my husband and my mother were laughing about something, and the good china was stacked by the sink, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, the room felt like something I belonged in. I am not going to tell you that everything healed perfectly after that. It didn't. My father and I still have conversations that go sideways. Still have moments where I can feel the old patterns pressing against the surface. My brother and I are polite in the way of people who know they will not be close but have agreed to be decent. There are things I will carry from those years that I don't think will fully put themselves down. But here is what I know. I know that I walked down that aisle alone and did not fall. I know that I built a life, a real one, a full one out of my own choices, with a person who chose me back and has never once made me feel like that choice was conditional. I know that I became the doctor I told my 12-year-old self I would be, and that every day I sit down with a scared person and explain the truth to them clearly. I am doing something that matters. My father is alive because surgeons did their jobs well. I am glad of that. I am working, slowly, towards something I think I will eventually be able to call peace. Thomas, for his part, has never once said I told you so. Not about any of it. Not when the medical board complaint was dismissed. Not after Thanksgiving dinner. Not on any of the difficult in-between days. Last spring, he came to find me in the garden on a Sunday morning. I had recently discovered that growing things is extraordinarily good for a person who spends her days in operating rooms, and he sat down in the other chair and handed me a coffee and looked at the tomato plants for a while. Happy? He asked. I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said. Really, yes. He nodded, satisfied, and drank his coffee. The tomatoes were coming in well. The morning was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a kid was learning to ride a bike, wobbling and laughing in equal measure, and someone was calling encouragement, and the sound of it carried all the way to where we were sitting. I stayed there for a long time. I didn't want to be anywhere else.